Hello, how are you? I'm Katie Gates, and thank you so much for joining me here on The Whole Agenda. Today, I want to talk about a subject that I don't hear much about, although we all come across it every single day of our lives. I have to believe from the things that I've seen, the things that people say, that we come across this problem every single day in our lives, and yet most people don't know how to address it. So stay with me. Today, I am going to share with you how to address selfishness or selfish people. How do you handle selfish people? That's the question that we all want to know. Those of us that come into contact with selfish people, we work with them. We have them as family members, co-workers. We meet them at social gatherings. And if we're honest, some of us may even have a selfish spouse. Ouch, that hurt. But it's the real truth. There's a lot of people in the U.S. alone, not to mention the entire world, with a selfish spouse, and they have no idea what to do. How do I handle a selfish person? And even more so, how do I handle a selfish spouse? Well, stay with me because we are going to dig deep into some good stuff to help you understand why they're selfish and how you can handle their selfish behavior. So, when it comes to selfish people, particularly men, because there's a lot more research on men when it comes to selfishness than women. And I can't even say there's a lot more research, but the research proves that it tends to be a lot more selfish men out in the world than women. Now, if that's true, nobody really knows because it's research, and research goes off numbers, and it's not like the research is scoring the entire world, or everyone in the world. Research scores a certain number of people from certain groups, and then they put their data together to come to one concluded resolution. So research shows that there are more selfish men in the world than there are women. Why is that? I don't know. Maybe because women were meant to be nurturers, mothers. We give birth, we have that caring, nurturing side naturally about us. It comes with us most of the time as women. So that could be one of the reasons why more men are more selfish than women. I don't know. I'm not really sure. But the one thing to keep in mind about selfishness and selfish men, it's not all to blame them, because research shows that selfishness or selfish behaviors usually stem from childhood trauma. It's like a lot of behaviors that we take on as adults, and we ask ourselves, why am I doing that? Or why am I thinking that? Why am I behaving that way? It's because most of the time, the behaviors that we adapt to is from the result of childhood trauma or a childhood teaching. And maybe not the best teaching, but it happens. So most selfish behaviors, man or woman, usually stems from childhood trauma. And like most behaviors we adapt and hold on to, right? Selfishness too is a behavior we learn during childhood. Think about it. You don't be giving and loving and kind and caring and gentle one day, and then all of a sudden the next day you're like, you know what? I don't want anything to do with that. I'm going to just hoard everything. I'm going to keep it all to myself. I don't want to share. I want to see people suffer. That would be mental, right? So we're not giving one day and then the next day selfish. That's unrealistic. So something had to happen from or during our childhood to where we have become selfish people today in our adulthood. We usually hear, and I remember as a child being told, stop being selfish. And I still hear parents say it to their young children today, and I still say it to my girls. And one of my girls are grown, and the other one is almost grown. And I will say, don't be selfish. And so we've all heard that term before, but for some people, they did not take that term literally. They kept selfishness with them, and they brought it into their adulthood. And so when you meet a selfish person, just remember that. Because usually if a child is nourished and taught the true meaning of giving, compassion, and goodness, most of the time, now hear the key word, most of the time, the child grows up to become those things. So most of the time, the child grows up to become that giving, compassionate, and good person. Most of the time, not always. But when it comes to selfish people, they miss the mark somewhere between their childhood and their adolescent years. So think about that. When you meet a selfish person, or if you know a selfish person, they miss the mark of learning compassion and really accepting it somewhere during their childhood on the way to adolescence. So it didn't just happen overnight. It didn't happen during their infancy. From childhood and their adolescent years, it happened somewhere between the two, right? And so this leaves us to think, well, I had trauma, and you're probably saying, you didn't grow up in the best household and you suffered childhood trauma and you didn't grow up to be a selfish, unkind, a person that cares less about the feelings of others. You didn't do that. I didn't do that. So why on earth did that happen to them? And I think nobody really knows, because we're all different, right? It's just like our fingerprints are different, our DNA is different. We're all different people, which is amazing to me, which is why there has got to be a God, because if you can create billions of people and everything is different, that is like mind blowing. So nobody really knows, because we're all different people. But what we do know is it happened early. It usually stems from trauma, and there are ways to handle selfish people. Like I said, men in particular, but there's selfish women as well. It goes both ways in both genders, female and male. We all suffer trauma some point in life. And depending on how we handle that trauma depends on, whether we become selfish people or not, right? So how do we handle selfish people? That's what you want to know. How do you handle a selfish spouse or family member or coworker or boss? How do you handle selfish people? Well, keep these things in mind. Most selfish people, man or woman, have strong feelings of being inadequate. They're very insecure. Even if they don't display it on the outside, within themselves, they feel very insufficient, inadequate, insecure. So their feelings of inadequacy can be about anything in their lives. So trying to figure out, well, what on earth can he or she be so insecure about, or have such inadequate feelings about? Trying to figure that out is like digging through a haystack trying to find that needle. If they don't openly tell you why, or share with you why they feel this way or why they behave this way, good luck trying to figure it out. So don't do it. You will rack your brain, cause headaches and panic attacks and anxiety. It is not worth it. Don't do it. Number 2, selfish people are people that feel dead inside. They feel dead inside. Truly, do the research. They feel dead inside. And sometimes they want to feel, they even question why they feel this way. Why can't I love? Or, why can't I be more compassionate? Or why don't I feel anything when I see certain things? That's because they have a feeling of deadness. They feel dead inside. So, in other words, they tend to feel nothing at all, and usually can't pinpoint why they feel this way. So these are things to keep in mind when you're dealing with selfish people. They have no clue why they feel or behave the way they do. Number 3, they have a strong sense of shame that usually stems from childhood trauma. Remember in the beginning of the video when I said most selfish people, their behavior stems from childhood trauma? This is very true. However, that childhood trauma then brings on shame in adulthood because the childhood trauma occurred somewhere between their childhood and their adolescent years. So when we become adults, we develop a sense of shame, because maybe when they were younger, they didn't really know what shame was. They felt something, but they didn't know that it was called shame. So now when we become adults, we know, okay, that thing that I was feeling when I was a child or when I was younger is called shame. So now they have to recognize it and own it. So they have a strong sense of shame that usually stems from childhood trauma or a deep secret they feel they must keep, and they fear exposure. So those are some of the reasons why people are selfish. They have deep secrets and they fear exposure of those secrets. Number 4, the fear of exposure keeps them in that selfish state, even if they have a desire to leave it behind. So something else to keep in mind, right? When it comes to intimacy and a selfish person, ladies, if you're out there and you're wondering what is going on in my relationship, in my marriage, and whatever, and it has to do with intimacy, whatever that may be. If you're wondering what's going on, keep this in mind. When it comes to intimacy, a selfish person during private moments and their intimate relationships are normally superficial, usually sex-based only. So they have no desire to please you. And not only do they not have desire, they could care less if they've pleased you at all. As long as they were pleased, they could care less about pleasing you at all. Because remember, we're talking about selfishness, right? A selfish person does not have the desire to please anyone else but themselves. That's one of the downfalls of being selfish, because at some point or the other, a selfish person is going to have a breakdown. That's real truth. They're going to have a downfall. And so they have no care whether you're pleased or not. They don't care about your feelings. As long as they were pleased and they are okay, they don't care about if you were pleased. So if you are in an intimate, relationship with a partner, your husband, and you're dealing with that selfishness and you've been asking yourself, well, what is the problem? Now you know. So like I said, most of their connections are sex-based. There's no real substance to them. So a lot of selfish people are commitment phobes. They don't want to be committed to one woman, or a woman doesn't want to be committed to one man, and vice versa. If they are selfish, they're usually commitment phobes. Next, in terms of their love, they have a scarcity mindset. Because remember what selfishness is, right? Selfishness, or selfish people, really don't like to give much. They feel that if they give, they're going to lose what they have, when in reality they're not. It's sickness. It's a mental sickness up here, mental trauma. And so they have a scarcity mindset. It goes back to those, intimate moments or being committed to one person. Usually selfish people feel as though, if I commit to one person, that person that I'm committing my love to, or I'm giving my love to, is going to take everything that I'm giving. It's never going to be enough. So in other words, they fear that giving their love away to someone will allow that person to restrict their behaviors. Well, where are you going? What time will you be back? Or I don't want you to go there. Why can't I go? What have you been up to today? So they don't like to be questioned. A selfish person, you'll notice, they don't like to be questioned, and they especially don't like to give you a response. So if you question them, most of the time they won't answer. They will not respond. They're not interested in learning anything new. They're not interested in expanding their minds. And it sounds like I'm bashing selfish people. I promise you I'm not. These are all facts. And if you have dealt with and or are dealing with a selfish person, I'm sure that you can agree. Just do the research. It's there. So they're not willing to give you an explanation, even though they could be in the complete wrong. Their wrongdoing really makes sense to give you an explanation. They're looking at you and because of their selfish tendencies, their behavior, they're not willing to let that go, to release that I'm sorry, or I was wrong, or it was my fault, or what can I do to make it up to you? And if they don't say it, they're not going to do it in their actions either. So there's not going to be a card. There's not going to be a text message, not going to be flowers, da, 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 da. And sometimes there are flowers because people think that if I could give without opening my mouth and truly apologizing, that's going to make things okay. But 9 times out of 10, that doesn't work either. So they have a scarcity mindset. They fear losing the little that they have or the lot that they have. Next, they are very stubborn and they refuse growth. So a lot of people have called selfish people, or even there's terms on psychological bulletins where selfish people, man or woman, they're referred to as a man child or a man or a woman child. In other words, they're adults, but they behave like children. So visually, they look like an adult, but mentally they behave like a child. And so because of that, they're stubborn and they're stubborn and they refuse growth. Even learning later on in life is usually not an option for them, because most of the time they feel as though they know it all, like they know everything. So they're stubborn. So trying to get them to learn something new that's going to better them, usually it's not something they're willing to do. It goes back to giving explanations or explaining, not something they're willing to do most of the time. Next, selfish people, as you know, like to receive, but they don't give much at all. They're not into giving. And if they do give, it's conditional based. It's not unconditional, right? So they're not into giving. And so, like I said, usually it's conditional based and it's motive based. But when they do give, and this is a big but to remember, when they do give, they usually give as a way of feeling and being seen as heroic, or the hero, the savior, the one people can always count on. See, that's the dangerous side of dating or being involved with selfish people, because to the outside world, it's almost narcissistic. Sometimes people confuse the two, a selfish person or a selfish man with a narcissistic man, because they're so similar. To the outside world, a selfish person may look like a giver or a savior or someone that everybody can always count on. But behind closed doors and with you, they're completely different. Inside, up here and in here, they're completely different. Ulterior motives. It's motive-based and conditional when it comes to their giving. So like I said, they like to receive, but they don't give much at all. Selfish men, women too, tend to give to receive something in return later. Goes back to that conditional giving. If they give you something and you know they don't normally do it and you know that they're selfish, keep in mind, or don't be surprised later on if they come back to you and say, well, do you remember such and such time? Basically it's now time for you to repay me. So they give motive, their giving is motive based. And selfish people, man or woman, aren't fulfilled people. They feel hollow or empty inside. It goes back to when I said Selfish people feel dead inside. They feel empty. So naturally, they don't feel fulfilled. There's nothing that can fulfill them. And normally a selfish person, especially a man, research shows, when they feel unfulfilled or dead inside, they connect themselves to meaningless connections, like I said, sex-based, and most of the time it becomes an addiction. So whether it be a sexual addiction, porn addiction, they may have an alcohol addiction that they hide very well. All of these addictions that they tend to develop, because when you're a selfish person, that means that you don't have a pure heart. And when you don't have a pure heart, that also means that you may not know God. And if you don't know God, your heart's going to be, it's not going to be pure. So they're usually unfulfilled. Excuse my dog for barking in the background. So what can you do? What can you do when dealing with selfish people? Now, I've given you things to keep in mind to help you understand selfish people more. So now what can you do? Well, the first thing you can do is understand that it's not you, it's them. We've heard that term so many times to where it's almost just becoming irritating. It's not you, it's them, but it's truth. It's not about you, it's about them. Number two, you can ask yourself, why are you there? Because if you're with a selfish person and you know that they're selfish, why are you still there? That involves mirror work, getting in the mirror, like this mirror right back here, getting in the mirror, asking yourself, why are you allowing yourself to stay with this selfish person who's not giving you anything? And if they are giving you something, it's crumbs, little teeny, itsy, witsy, bitsy crumbs. So why are you there? Ask yourself, are you trying to save them? Are you trying to save someone who doesn't want to be saved? Because if we learn nothing at all, we have to understand that we can't save people who do not want to be saved. It's not going to happen. You will kill yourself trying. Next, understanding that a person will only change if they want to change will help free you from being in a selfish relationship or putting yourself in positions where people are selfish. Understanding that they'll only change if they want to change. So you have to accept that. We have to accept that when we're dealing with selfish people. They're not going to change unless they want to change. And then I want you to focus on you and who you are. Focus on your own strengths because you're strong. If you're here watching this video, asking yourself, how on earth can I handle selfish people? You're strong. So focus on your strengths. Even if you feel like you don't have any, trust me, you do. Find and focus on your strengths. If that means getting a tablet and jotting down the things that you are great at and the things that you love about yourself, make those your strengths and focus on them, right? So find your strength and then find the courage to leave, because sometimes that's what it boils down to. Sometimes it requires finding the courage and the strength to say goodbye. And it's not that you want to, it's that you know you deserve better. Because God didn't create us to be connected or yoked with selfish people. Because like I said prior, selfish people can't love God. Because God is not when it comes to selfish in the term of what we're talking about, God does not like that. God likes us to be compassionate and giving and loving and kind and pure. And if they don't know and love God, the person that you're dealing with when it comes to selfishness, there's no way they can love and know you and treat you with the respect that you know you deserve. So sometimes it just means bye. You just have to leave. Is it easy? No. Will it hurt? Yes. But in the long run, I promise you, God is going to present you with something more significant for you, something greater for you. That's the faith, the belief that you have got to have. If you are a non-believer, you still have to have faith and knowing that something greater out there is for you. That's just how it works. Something greater out there is for you. And like I said, if all else fails, find the courage to just say goodbye. But if you decide to stay, keep this in mind. When you're focusing on your strengths, don't focus on their weaknesses. Don't focus on your spouse's or your friend's weaknesses. That only makes matters worse. Focus on your strengths and then see how your strengths can help improve their weaknesses. But don't focus on their weaknesses or don't verbalize their weaknesses. And lastly, keep this here and up here. I often say that a selfish person is yet a sick mind in need of healing because there's something going on up here and in here. The two are not connected. A selfish person is yet a sick mind in need of healing. And also keep this in mind. Most often, selfish people are deeply miserable people, and they enjoy inflicting their misery on others. It's like that old saying, misery loves company. Well, selfishness is a form of misery. There's something disconnected up here, like I said prior. And naturally, a miserable person loves company. The company they keep, they want to be just as miserable as they are. So it's very sad to say that most miserable people are selfish people that enjoy inflicting pain onto others, or they enjoy seeing the results of their pain that they're inflicting on to you. That's very sad, but it's very true. So find the courage to leave. Sometimes that's what it takes. So I'm Katie Gates, and I hope that I've helped you understand, the ins and outs of selfish people, men and women, and have given you some ways to handle or to deal with them, because we can deal with everything. There's always a way. So like I said, just remember it stems from childhood, and know that's not an excuse for behavior today because we're adults. A lot of us have things going on up here and in here. That does not give us an excuse to mishandle people. So I'm Katie Gates, and thank you so much for joining me here on The Whole Agenda. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, leave me a comment. I love reading them, and I read them all. If you know someone that this video can help, send it to them. I urge you to send the video to them. I love you all so much. Have an amazing, amazing day. Bye.